Howdy, folks. Happy Monday. We're back. I can only speak for me. It's always a pleasant day the next day after Christmas because that means Christmas is 364 days away. I'm so glad. Now, I won't fully celebrate Russ until it's January 2nd because then we're through that corridor of bull crap from Thanksgiving to New Year's where everything is running around. The day before Thanksgiving, it's running around the turkey and making this and making that and then buying Christmas presents, blah, 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 blah. It's like, and now it's New Year's and New Year's Eve parties. Screw that. I just want to get back to like the Monday through Friday and then get to the weekend, the normal.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So, I get it.
Start with the pre-show. Go ahead.
So I'm going to talk about the Jets-Jaguars game yesterday. That was a game early in the season where I'm pretty sure, like, before the season started, they knew how the draft was going to go. They knew they were going 1-2. They wanted that game in a big way because they probably figured, hey, the Jags would have a good season, even though I don't know why they would think that because I didn't like the coach.
Because Urban Meyer's a winner. That's why.
Right. He's a winner when he can bully people. But anyhow, they had that game set up so that, hey, we could show off Trevor Lawrence. Sorry, Ryan Lawrence is a different player. They could show off Trevor Lawrence and see how Zach Wilson is with the crappy Jets. And they got the opposite. And I think that was good. It was a good game for Wilson because it the 52-yard TD run, longest run of any Jet quarterback. Now, CBS did maybe the worst job I've seen on a broadcast in a decade. So when Wilson had that run, all they would say is, well, that's the longest run for a Jet since 2018, but they never said that, hey, that was the record and he beat Darnold, who had a 46-yard TD run the year before. Okay. So then Braxton Berrios gets a 103-yard kick return. They don't even bother saying, hey, that's the second longest in Jets history. The first one's Brad Smith, 106. Like, it's just, if you don't want to point out any positives for the Jets, then don't put them on a highlight game. And it just seems like CBS was just saying stuff about the Jets like 2 quarters too late. Like, I would say literally an hour after I tweeted about that being the longest run for a Jet quarterback, they put, oh, yeah, it was the longest run for a Jet quarterback. It's like they have all of these statistics at their fingertips. And it was just bizarre how they were calling it. But it was a good game for Wilson, and we'll see if he can build off of that.
Well, I know that, Jan, I had heard I don't know what the hell I was listening. Oh, Bill Simmons podcast. And, they're saying, well, that's with the 2022 draft, there are 2 linchpin, excellent defensive players at the top of the draft. And of course the Jets win this and now they're out at the top 2. So is this like another situation where they're not going to get Trevor Lawrence, they're going to get Wilson, and now they're going to be 3rd or 4th and they'll get somebody a level below whoever these top 2 defensive players are. I mean, again, I'm one who, when your team is down this big, I want you to friggin' lose every single goddamn time because I want the high pick.
I can see the argument, and it's funny, I was Steph AM before, and the guy was going off on this, and all the callers were calling in on this. But I mean, it's a dual-edged sword. First of all, nobody knows who's going 1 or 2 yet. Anyway, nobody knows. Guys, we all know in the combine, guys end up shooting up the charts,
right,
and teams that are in need of quarterback end up reaching for guys sooner rather than later. Right? It's the same. Look, the only thing I'm hoping for these days is Seattle to keep losing because the Jets have Seattle.
That's the other thing. The Jets
to me, that's
winning.
The only thing I really care about right now is Seattle losing. The Jets winning. Look. As the Jaguars are driving in that game, I'm not thinking I want the Jets to lose. I'm thinking, what about the 6 points that Jets took off the board by two chip shot field goals they didn't go for because they went on 4th down being aggressive? To me, that's what I was thinking about. Not, oh my God, I'm going to cost myself a higher draft pick because the Jets are losing. Because first of all, as somebody took the Chargers in their survivor pool yesterday, I did not expect the Texans to end up winning yesterday. Yeah, no, double elimination. I already had a loss. There was 6 teams left. One guy doesn't have a loss. He took the Eagles, still doesn't have a loss. So if he runs the table, I was not going to win anyway, but still kind of painful to watch it. So as we've seen, we never know what's going to happen the last 2 weeks. None of us know in terms of where their stand is going to be, who's going to move up in this. Yeah, there's the kid Hutchinson. There's another defensive lineman. I mean, I think they're either going to go for an offensive lineman potentially if there was a guy who was there that they really want to get. You look at the draft from this year. I mean, Russ can attest. Wilson, we still have hopes for. There's still a lot of ground, still of work that still needs to be done, especially the 5-yard little dump passes that he throws into the ground.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he should be spending about 300 of them every day during the offseason throwing to kind of build up muscle memory so he doesn't throw them into the ground.
He did.
Right. So you look at Carter, who they added, you look at Elijah Moore, and you look at Vera Tucker, they had a pretty good draft early on, and then some of the later guys they hit on. So there's cautious optimism that Douglas seems to know what he's doing. And who knows who's going to slip to them at 3 or 4, and none of us know where they're going to. I mean, look, I don't see him being Tampa, so I think we can kind of pencil in next week as a loss. Then who knows what happens afterwards?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I'll say is I still don't have full belief in Douglas because I watched Denzel Mims look out on the sideline, and they were bragging about that pick because they got an extra pick and they're going to cut him, and teams called for him, and they didn't want to trade him for an asset. So, but at any rate. The biggest reason why Jets fans shouldn't have worried if the Jets won or not yesterday is because Seattle took care of things for you. Yeah. You're still going to have 2 very high draft picks, and that's all that matters.
So the one interesting thing I will put on Mike, so my direct TV yesterday, ironically, when you go to the guide, listed it where the Jets should be was Bills Patriots. So that tells you all you need to know in terms of what they thought everybody was going to watch. And even have Jets Jaguars listed. It said Bills Patriots was the thing.
Well, and I made some comments in our group chat, and that's like, and you'll be surprised, a little bit surprised at this take. First of all, the broadcast was really good. We had Ian Eagle; he's one of the best.
Yeah, he's good.
But I know that the Bills were pissed off after losing to New England in Buffalo because of the 50-mile-an-hour winds. They're, in their ego, they're like, they got pissed off at a Buffalo reporter, Jerry Sullivan, who I know, and I did a radio broadcast with, and I like Jerry, and I think he was right to ask the question, when you lose to a team that threw 3 passes the entire game, aren't you embarrassed? And we know sports performers use criticism as fuel. If you watched Jordan and that the special on the Bulls and him on ESPN, any slight he used as motivation. I get that. That's fine. But as the Bills are walking off the field, one of the safeties was saying, "Hey, where's Jerry Sullivan?" Which is just friggin' ridiculous. But even worse than that was during the game. There is no class anymore in especially football. The drop the ball for first down, the flex the muscles, or waving bye-bye to the New England fans. Josh Allen did that after they got the last first down. Stephon Diggs was taking verbal abuse from some New England fans in the end zone and either said, shut the F up, or something else along those lines. New England is cheap, they did, but honestly, they weren't exactly classy winners. I think in the NFL period, Jan, just for you first, I think class is gone. I think it's this posing crap, and I hate it.
Well, so there's a couple of taunting penalties yesterday. Guys got first downs, right? So you can drop it, but you can't spin it. Right, so I think McLeod from the Steelers got one when they were losing to the Chiefs huge. They got a first down, and then it got taken, I think, off the boards because it was a taunting penalty.
Yeah, Allen did that once. He spun the ball, and he spun it at the guy's foot, and they called him for...
Right, so I can understand that. Look, if you're late in the game and get a first down or something to clinch the game and basically, win the game against your divisional rival, I get it. But if you're down 30 to something, you get a first down, you probably should shut your mouth.
Right.
And that's kind of my view. Look, that's just the way sports and life in general has gone, right? I'm not a big believer. Look, you guys know I played 4 years of college ball. I was never big into taunting then. I mean, and I had a couple of games where salted games away with free throws, one of those things where you're waving bye-bye to the crowd because you know what? Go out the way you would want to be treated. Personal view. Others, that's not the way kind of sports in general, and especially professional sports in general, works. Even with the fraternization between everybody, you would think that wouldn't happen. There's probably more of a propensity for it to happen now than ever in the past.
I mean, Russ, these two teams hate each other on the level of, I'd say, Chiefs, Raiders, and Ravens, Steelers now. There's general dislike between the players, because now New England, like I said, New England is cheap. Matthew Judon, who's a linebacker for the Patriots, he knows Josh Allen's got a toe injury, and as he's running around, he trips him right on his toes. Stuff like that.
I'll make this quick. My dad just told me a long time ago when I used to compete in sports, always shake hands with the opposition. Don't be a spoiled sport no matter what. And he's right. And now we see too much of it.
And this is, I didn't play any kind of sports in high school. I played, street hockey and things like that.
I didn't play high school sports either. I did not.
But when I played, pickup football or hockey, if the guy, was just like try to score on you and he was a fair competitor, no problem. If somebody mouthed off, I would mouth off back, and if somebody did somebody, I'd kick them in the nuts. It's like, I'm sorry. It's like you deserve it if you mouth off or do something cheap. So you get your comeuppance. Anyway, so let's start the show. We wasted our time on football. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Monday, December 27th, 2021.
I'm Jan Levine.
Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the HockeyBuzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. We'll be joined by Kevin Allen in a few minutes. Maybe Pete Tessier for an insurance update.
It's relevant.
Yeah, it is. Oh, no, I have to say, like the point that Pete made on Friday's show, I never thought of it in terms of how that would affect teams and how that would affect playing games. The insurance aspect is something that is definitely have to be a
big deal.
Factor. Okay, well, let's start with the World Juniors. It was day one yesterday. Thankfully, like in between plays of the Bills game, I'm sorry, I watched almost all of USA Slovakia after that friggin' boring Dallas Washington game. So
unless, of course, you're in your fantasy semifinals and then you're concerned about what happens.
Yeah, unless you're playing. Imagine playing against Joe Burrow if you were in a fantasy.
I had him on my bench in my league, and unfortunately, I have Rodgers as my other quarterback, so it's not like it's an easy decision.
Well, let's start with Canada and Czechia, or I'll say the Czechs, because that
either way is fine.
Yeah. Now the Czechs went up 3-1 in the first period. Canada was a little stunned. A little punchy, and then they gained their footing and came back, tied it up, and raced forward to a 6-3 victory. Owen Power with the hat trick. We'll talk about him in a minute, but just in the overall game, Russ, of what I saw of it, I wasn't very impressed with Garan, the goaltender. I was a little surprised that they played him over Kosa, but we were talking about this yesterday, and that's sort of just the Team Canada way.
Well, I'm not going to hang it on Garan. I want to give Czechia a lot of credit because pre-tournament I did pick them as like my fun team to watch, like my sleeper team, because they have a lot of 10 drafted players. Nobody talks about them. Unfortunately for David Jiricek, that was tough with Will Cully. I don't think that was the cleanest of plays, but whatever. I hope he can come back. But him and Stanislav Svozil, easy to say. I had him as a first round talent. He ended up going to third round to Columbus. That blue line did a lot of damage to Canada. They were getting the puck up the ice. They were getting it to their forwards, Goot, and otherwise they were really looking good. And it was one of those things where it's just they took some bad penalties. And when they took the bad penalties, that's when, Canada got their power play out there, and that's when things really happened. I still think Czechia can do some things. I do. And I do think they'll make some noise. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. But they had other guys step up.
Yeah,
it's not a big thing.
It's not a team to sleep on. But in terms of Canada, I mean, we're looking at a team that's like, as usual, is just overloaded, Jan. And if they play up to their potential, they win the tournament. It's like it's up to, another team to have a hot goaltender to stop them, or them not playing at the top of their abilities. I mean, they're just an extremely talented, loaded team.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, you see the names that are on this team, right? And the number of first-round picks, the overall talent, the guys are likely to be first-round picks. I mean, you say we'll talk about Power. Power, first defenseman ever with 3 goals, I think, in a tournament ever. So that just tells you the kind of game that he had, and we know just how good generically he is overall. I mean, went first overall clearly for a reason, and I'm sure Sabres fans are clamoring to get him over as soon as Michigan season's ends. So
they're pumping their fist down on Chippewa. Are you kidding me?
No doubt. You know, the other thing, Jan, look, Czechia didn't even get necessarily the best out of Jan Mysak. If they didn't lose their tempers, that would have been a very close game. And I think the mistake that Canada has made in this tournament was not having Brandt Clark, not having the kind they decided to set up the kind of team where they have this bruising fourth line, but Czechia doesn't care about the bruising fourth line. They'll skate around that. Mm-hmm. And there is some things with Canada that are not what you want them to be. Do they have the most talent? Sure. But they're not the best team. I really don't think they're the best team.
Well, Russ, I mean, I think they've built that team to compete against the U.S. I mean,
to some degree they did, but they didn't put their best defense out there.
Right.
And I think in the end, defense and goaltending wins this tournament. I've seen it enough times, especially in the last few years, how it's changed. Yeah, the Owen Power thing was fantastic, and that was anybody who ever doubted him could certainly just look at that game and say, yeah, he had his impact. But we'll talk more about. I did an article about Power and Sanderson, saying how equally these guys are going to lead both of their teams and they do it in completely different ways. And it's a good argument because you could say, I could tell you Sanderson's better than Power, and you could tell me Power's better than Sanderson, and we might both be right.
Okay, Kevin. So we're talking about the Canadians and the Czechs. It was, as usual, the Canadians have a difficult time early in the tournament and then have to do something to sort of get motivated, and then they get going, and then they're operating on all 8 cylinders. And they started slow against the Czechs and ended up with 6 goals and win 6-3. I don't know if you caught much of this game or what your thoughts on it were.
Yeah, I did. And I stumbled into this conversation at the exact right time because it's something I wanted to talk about. After the game, I saw someone on Twitter who I didn't know. I think it was just a fan, brought up something that I've always been intrigued about, too. He said what he loves about the World Junior Championship is, there's the talent issue, but also it's the chemistry that sort of comes together. And from year to year, we never know. Even though, and I know, I think it was Dave Starman said after the U.S. game, they're not really defending their championship, even though there's several guys on there, because it's a completely different team. Even though they have some of the same guys, you don't know how it kind of all comes together. And that's the intriguing part about this tournament. I know I read a story before the tournament about the Swedish team, how it had some talent. They didn't know how it would all mesh together. And yet I watched them against Russia, and it did seem to kind of come together. And, you can sort of speculate. Well, I'm sure Russ feels like he knows what they're going to do, but the rest of us were kind of guessing whether.
No. Listen, World Juniors is the hardest tournament to figure out. It really is.
Right. But again, not so much from the talent side of it. It's just whether they're coming together. Canada,
right,
just does an incredible job every year of bringing sort of teams together. Now, it doesn't always work every year, but probably they've been more consistent than most to sort of kind of figure out how they're all going to mesh together. But I agreed exactly with what Russ was saying, and I watched that game, and I'm a little less sure of that this year as I watched that game. I just thought that when they were down 3-1, I expected them to come back, but there was something about that team that they're still trying to sort it all out.
Yeah, I mean, I was at the World Junior in Buffalo a few years back, and honestly, it's the teams they definitely evolve. They definitely at the beginning of the tournament that they're sort of feeling themselves out. They're sort of getting used to their line mates. By game 3, as the round robin is almost over with, they're playing at a level that whether it up to where their talent is. Now, you talked about the Sweden-Russia game, Kev, and the Swedes beat the Russians 6-3, and I just looked at the stats here because I didn't see much of the game. Askarov 3 goals on 16 shots, and they pull him for Guskov, the backup. But Russ, the only thing I'm saying is he didn't look good in the Canada-Russia prelim game, and they pull him in the first game.
He was fine in this game. Like, this is just typical Russian baloney.
Okay.
They left players home that were good, guys that were in the OHL and NCAA. They left them at home. 2 of them were defensemen. Their defense isn't any good. They have Michkov, which is great, but guess what? The team stinks, and Zubov had these. There was no organization for that team whatsoever. They were doing typical Russian hockey, which is we're going to have to just come back here and just play open hockey because we have no other chance now because we've fallen too far back in this game. Sweden's a weird one because I just wrote about them for Full Press because, their last medal was in 2018 when Elias Anderson threw it in the crowd, their silver medal. And I was at that game. Like we covered that, Mike and I.
I was sitting right next to you.
I know. We were interviewing the guys after, and that was a moment. But they've only won 2 medals in like the last 7 years, and this team is loaded. Sweden has so much talent, and Jesper Wallstedt is so good. Maybe this will be their year. I don't know. I didn't pick it to be, but you never know because they do have a lot of the elements. But Russia, I could tell you, Zubov does not have a good handle on this team. The fact that they switched him for the other coach last minute was also suspect. Everything is suspect with this Russian team.
They never have a handle on their team.
Very rarely.
That's just been the story about the Russian at the World Juniors is they're just, they're always very talented, but, they have a difficult time in this tournament kind of sorting out how it needs to be played and what they need to do to be successful. And I did like your phrasing of Russian bologna. Now, is that an ingredient in borscht? just checking.
Just beef.
It gives it the coloring.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, because Russ was just referring to an article he wrote for Sportsology where he's talking about power and talking about Jake Sanderson. And Kevin, you wrote something for Detroit Hockey Now where you're talking about Edvinsson. It's like nobody's talking about him, even though
we're talking about him.
We're talking about it now because I'm mentioning it, but I'm saying nobody's talking about him at the level of power, but maybe we should be talking about him at the level of power.
Yeah, I think you're splitting hairs with those guys. I think they're both dominant defensemen, and I think they're going to be good. It's interesting. The Red Wings, Steve Yzerman says and believes that you have to earn your way on his team. Lucas Raymond, I think it was less than 50-50 that he was going to make this team, but he played for the Red Wings because he looked so good in the preseason, and they were fully prepared to send him to Grand Rapids, but he earned his way on. I think with Edvinsson right now, this is just a gut feeling I have, is they think he's going to play next season. Like, I don't know that they've penciled him in. I think he's still got to earn it. I don't think that they would be bothered by having to send him to Grand Rapids for a few games. But they think at some point they're going to, he'll be on the blue line for Detroit next week. Next season. And imagine Sider and him together.
Well,
same thing you could probably say about Sider.
Right? The one thing I would say, having watched Sider all year, is Edvinsson is more of a risk taker offensively than Sider. Sider is very capable of being an offensive force, but the only time you see it is in overtime when he's much more dashing and daring. But he doesn't, move into the slot or carry the puck behind the net. Edvinsson will. He'll take it.
He'll make these hard passes, but he's very calm doing it. And I think that's the difference with him and Sider is he's not afraid to do it, but he's also very calm when he's doing it. And that's something that is, shows that he is a smart player and he's smart beyond his years. I think with Edvinsson, though, and I do think he could play at the NHL level next year, I do think I'd like to see him be a little stronger, though, because, again, he's playing against these guys. He could dominate these guys a little bit. A few games in Grand Rapids wouldn't hurt him just so he sort of gets that feeling after a good summer. I might do that first and then put him up there.
Well, Russ, he can get that. I don't know what Grand Rapids' record is, if whether they're going to make the Calder Cup playoffs, but the SHL season usually ends, I think, in mid to late April. So he could end up going over and playing in Grand Rapids after the year as an AHL on a tryout contract. So they may want to do that. And
I think that's a good point, Mike. I think that'll happen. I think they're going to want him to get those games in just get a taste of it. And I also agree that he needs to get stronger, Russ. I mean, I think that's one of the things you hear from the Red Wings is,
he's got that frame, and boy, when he's stronger, then that's when you're really going to see how good he really is.
What you don't see that I know to be the case, because I've talked to people within the Swedish organization, is he is quite the presence in the dressing room. Okay. He's funny, he's outgoing, and I think he'll be part of the leadership group moving forward as once he gets his feet wet.
I can tell you this: last year at the World Juniors, there was one game where he pretty much won on his own. And I try and interview the coach after the game, and all he would say is that Edmundson was rock solid. He didn't want to oversell him, but he did have to say, this guy can pretty much do everything on this team. And
could Yzerman not hit a grand slam home run on any? It's like Seider, Raymond, Edmundson, Kosa maybe, but it's like, geez, I mean, he doesn't.
I have to give Yzerman some credit. But I don't think it was that hard to figure out that Edmundson was going to be good. I think the teams that didn't want Edmundson have to shake their heads.
Right.
Well, that's the point. They may have to answer for that.
Right.
Like I think the quote from the Red Wings is they, and you hear this all the time, but we were surprised that he was here. Well, I think they really meant that. I think they were prepared. I believe they were going to take that Johnson was the guy they thought they had, but Columbus took him right before, and so that left him with Edmundson. I think they felt Columbus would take Edmundson.
No, you even Kev, because I'm looking at exactly where he went, and where did he go? Like
he went sixth overall last year.
Six
Howard, Beniers, McTavish, Hughes, Johnson. Kind of hard to argue with the first five guys that went.
No, I'm not. But
by the way, I love McTavish.
He has been a man among boys in this tournament. You can tell he played in the NHL to start the season.
Yeah,
just from the way he plays in these games, no question.
Extremely,
that he has a level of confidence that these guys don't necessarily have.
Extremely confident and at a speed level that is NHL speed.
I'll tell you, you know who the one that's going to end up answering for Edmundson going 6 is the Devils with Luke Hughes, because Edmondson's better than Luke Hughes.
Yeah, but you knew they were going to take Hughes just because of the Hughes factor.
I know, but again, is that worth more than getting the better player?
Right.
Yeah, but I mean, there's always politics, and no matter what kind of profession you're in, and I maybe that's the only play they really had. I don't know. I don't know that enough about what the discussions were, but I bet they felt some pressure to put the two brothers together.
Yeah. Now the Finns won 3-1 over Germany yesterday. They're leading Austria 1-0, so they get a nice early, easy schedule before playing the tougher games in their group. Burying the lead, the U.S. played Slovakia last night in Red Deer, 3-2 win. I thought, Russ, because I watched this entire game, it was a lot closer than it should have been. At 3-0, the U.S. I think took the foot off the gas pedal.
Yeah, they definitely took their foot off the gas, and I think that's something that Nate Lehman will get on them for. But the differences in this game that you saw was the defense was really engaged. They weren't giving up many great chances. Comesso had to make a few great saves, and that's really all you want to do for Comesso. If you have to have him make 5 or 6 great saves, you may lose that game. He's just, he's not a super top flight goalie. He's a good goalie. And so I felt like they did a good job with him. I didn't see how many blocks they had, but it seemed like they were doing a better job with that. And honestly, their speed, they're sitting Sasha Pastujov, who won with helped win the tournament last year with a massive goal, is a massive goal scorer, but he's one of the slower players on the team. He's not even playing because they want to play this faster team, and they're playing Dickinson and James instead. I can't argue with them. And Kev, that's the one I'll give Yzerman credit for, is Dominic James. Because when I saw him in camp, I was like, wow, Dominic James is a player, and I think he should make this team. And not only has he made the team, but now he's an important part of the team, and that's a guy who got no press coming into this.
Yeah, no, this U.S. team is interesting, to say the least, and I think it has a chance to win it, but Again, we got to wait and see kind of how it comes together before we really know. I think goaltending is one of their weaker
It is.
areas. We in the past the U.S. has had the likes of going back a few years, John Gibson, all the way up to Spencer Knight, and now all of a sudden I think we have a very kind of it's dependable but not outstanding. A pedestrian's a good word
what's really
for it.
important on that team? It's a lot like in college hockey when a lot of the teams with a lot of the returning players end up going far because they're a little bigger, stronger, older, have that all going for them. The fact that they have Faber and Sanderson and Clevin, all returning defensemen, does make their defense very formidable. And that's something like Sanderson. The reason I did this article was because of Sean Simpson, because he was talking about Power, and then someone brought up Sanderson, and I decided to look up how many minutes each of them were playing in college. And actually, Power was playing a little more. He's playing like a little over 24 minutes. Sanderson's playing 23 minutes. These guys are 19 years old, right? But what's interesting is Sanderson actually is averaging more points per game than Owen Power.
Right.
And how does he get those points? He makes his players better. He does a better job of that than Power does. But Power can really control a game from the blue line with his size, with his scoring ability, and occasionally physicality. Actually, Sanderson's more physical. So to me, it's interesting because I know some people look at the goals for Owen Power and say, that's why would you even compare the two? But again, the way the NHL is now, it's not all about scoring from the blue line. And actually Sanderson kind of plays this complete smart game, and he's only 189 pounds himself.
Well, I mean,
Russ ended up being better than Power, even though Power's got all these tools that we all love.
Both of them in their respective games, I saw Sanderson go deep close to the net a couple times. I saw Power doing that as well.
Power always did that,
yeah. So now, and I have to say for Leaf fans out there, Matthew Nyes, their top pick, he had a really good game. I mean, he scored a really nice one-timer for the opener. So that's encouraging.
Yeah, that pass that he got was incredible.
Yeah. I actually thought Comesso played better than you thought he did, Russ. So I thought the biggest save he made when it became 3-1, and they came down right afterwards, and he made two big saves in a row to keep it 3-1 and prevent the momentum from kind of doing a 180 then. But the thing that concerns me is we saw it in the first game, bad penalty. They gave up 3 goals to lose a game. This game, up 3-zip, take the foot off the gas pedal. You play a better team. You're starting to play with fire if you start doing that way too often. That to me would be the concerning part after watching the U.S. win.
They did this last year too, and since they have a lot of
better
the same
team
guys,
last year, I think though. I think better overall.
What I was going to say is because they have the same coach and a lot of the same returning players,
right,
I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and say, okay, they're going to learn from this because they didn't have any prelims. Like, had one game,
right?
So this is some of these games they're sort of still getting the rust off to some degree.
In a rough division, though.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No question about it.
I want to bring another player, Logan Cooley. For a couple of reasons. Number one, he's going to go in the top 10, and that's what scouts are telling me. Do you agree with that, Russ?
I think top 5.
Yeah, top 5. Okay. I haven't seen enough of the prospects this year, but the other fact I want to bring up about him, and I didn't even know this. I read it in a story out of Pittsburgh. Is oftentimes we hear these stories like, well, so and so donated some equipment to a program. Well, Sidney Crosby was doing that for years. I think maybe it coincides with Hockey Across America, or it coincides with something where every year he donates equipment. And it all goes to people who are going to try hockey for the first time.
And he played for the Little Penguins. That's what he played.
The Little Penguins. Well,
Cooley is now like fully in charge of that.
Yeah. Well, now Cooley is the first great player that has come out of that as a result of that. That he got his start in hockey with equipment that Sidney Crosby donated. Now, you don't think of that, the lasting impact of someone doing that, but now we see it. We see a player that is going to go in the top 5 in the NHL draft. Because
I asked him about that. I did, and he was like, I said, "Do you remember, with Crosby there, doing all that?" And he goes, "I kind of do," but he goes, "It was so long ago, and I played so many games." He goes, "I kind of think I do remember it, but I'm not quite sure." But the thing about him that's truly, I think, what makes him a cut above a lot of other players is playing second line center and winning faceoffs against a lot of this great talent. I mean, the speed's there, the shot's there. He's a great passer. But if you could win faceoffs like that against these stronger players, that impresses me more.
But I mean, that sort of goes along. It's sort of, Kev, in hockey. Like, okay, Austin Matthews playing in Arizona, his idol was Shane Doan. I don't know about equipment, but I know that he was playing at the same facilities during the summer that Doan was playing at, and Doan, helped a young Austin Matthews sort of find his way. That's happening with Nyes. Nyes he played for the Arizona Junior Coyotes, and his idol was Austin Matthews. So It's sort of like a circle of life type of thing. It just perpetuates the game, and that's a good.
Well, and it means more in hockey than most sports, just because So and there's still such a long way to go. Like, from when I first started covering the league till now, the growth of the NHL has been exponential. Yes. I mean, it was kind of a blip on the radio. But it's still, I watched CNN's list of top 10 sports achievements of the year, and the back-to-back titles by the Tampa Bay Lightning didn't even make the top 10. And there were things on there that I would have thought, yeah, they could have definitely been better than that, but they didn't do that. So there's still a long way to go, but we also have made some strides in terms of expanding the footprint of the sport.
I'm sure the Buccaneers and Tom Brady winning was probably up there on that list, right, Kev?
For sure it was. Yeah.
One thing I could add to what Kevin said, and then you can go, Mike.
Yep.
As far as the city thing, so when I spoke to Cooley, and the pride that he has in Pittsburgh is incredible. Like, you hear about it in other sports, right? Like, hey, I'm from here, whatever. But it does seem to be bigger in hockey, and especially when they end up playing a lot of years there through the sport and then eventually go to another league like the USHL or something. But even for the Fall Classic, it was back in Pittsburgh, and that was a big deal for him. He had his family there. Like, when I chatted with him about that, it meant a lot to him. And it's, again, you could see it in other sports a little bit, but I do think it's more in hockey. I do.
We welcome Anthony to the show, who was waiting long moments for a certain media availability, which we're all in that, or almost all of us were in that place today. Okay, let's move to the news from the NHL, and there was a lot over the weekend. More game postponements, which is to be expected. I saw, I think, 9,400 positive cases in Ontario, it was like 400 or 600 a couple weeks ago. And now Omicron is just blowing up everywhere. So the entire slate of games that was supposed to be played today was postponed. The NHL came out yesterday and postponed 3 more games. One of them was Toronto and Pittsburgh because Kyle Dubas came out and said 24 of the Toronto Marlies were positive on top of 14 Leafs. They didn't have enough players to field the team, so they're not going to be playing another game until New Year's Day. But more importantly, Kevin, the NHL and the PA agreed on some adjustments, at least until the All-Star break, and one of them is bringing back the taxi squad, which I think was we talked about it. I thought it was going to be necessary, and they had to go down that road because their goal here is not to cancel or postpone any more games than they absolutely have to.
Well, yeah, and it's just sort of the embarrassment of the fact that some teams have had to play shorthanded because they couldn't get under the cap. And it's really not their fault that COVID is taking so many players out. It would be one thing if COVID was taking out 1 or 2, but some of these teams have 10 players out now. I think I read today, unless they had one day, I think Minnesota Wild is the only team without someone on the
list.
That's true. Yeah, so I don't know whether that changed today, but there's some interesting discussions kind of going on in Detroit, for example. Just in case they are going to play this game on Wednesday, Jeff Blashill, who didn't look good, by the way, he came off the COVID list, and I know most athletes are handling this pretty well, but I wasn't the only reporter that thought, Jeff doesn't look so good today. He was one of those who had it, but he made the point is they've had to debate within the office whether they want to drag Grand Rapids players into their mix and send that back to Grand Rapids with him, which is I'm sure being discussed around the league as well. So, those are things that you have to sort of consider because they're going to need those. And the other point is, I was talking to a general manager about this, and he said the one hope is when they had gone to the Christmas break that maybe they'd be able to clear this up a little bit. And boy, it sure hasn't happened.
Well, but you also have to depend on a lot for that to happen, and it didn't. I mean, there's going to be a certain amount of luck. I know people were like, well, why did you even pause? I thought the pause was a good idea, and it doesn't mean that they shouldn't still pause just because things look bad. But
it's not,
the hardest thing is, though,
it's not about things looking bad, Russ. It's the fact that if you pause, Anthony, this was my thought process from the very beginning. If you pause, okay, the guys who are positive, they'll get past it. Most of them are asymptomatic. They'll test negative. They'll get back into action. Omicron is so transmissible right now that there's no guarantee that the guys who've been negative all along aren't going to be positive. And all you're doing is postponing games. And at a certain point, that 3 weeks in February will be saturated, and you won't be able to make up games. You're going to have to. I think the taxi squad here is going to have to tough through things like the NBA and the NFL are doing.
Yeah, and to a point again, one of the questions I was asked on another show was the concern about the product. At this point right now, teams are just trying to shoulder through,
right,
and trying to figure that out. I think in many ways it felt like a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation when it came to on-ice product and things of that sort. And we're going to see the effects of this throughout the rest of the season. I think Ian Cole had put it best, is that we're going to be dealing with this throughout the rest of the year. So as I said, I hope you enjoyed the relative normalcy of October to early December, because it won't be that way probably for most of the rest of the season. That said, I think and that's been one of the conversations I think I also had with other people in other walks, not just with hockey, but also if you have people stepping away from it, if you're out in the community, there may be even more of a chance that you might get it. So it's difficult to say what was the best thing to do. And I think the NHL, again, was kind of maybe hoping and leaning on the cushion of February. But as Mike indicated, that cushion very quickly is going to get saturated and how many games you can be able to kind of get in one shot. It's going to be difficult. I don't think there's any real easy answer. But that being said, if you're going to go anywhere, if you think you can be on the side of caution, then that's probably the way to go in this circumstance.
The one other point I was trying to make is, so as an example for the Flyers, even having this taxi squad, the fact that they're going to be on the West Coast for a significant amount of time makes it very hard, even with the taxi squad, to have a full team if you have one more issue with the team while you get there. And
you have two players that they're anticipating getting back in because Chuck Fletcher spoke to this today, that they're anticipating getting back both Kevin Hayes and Morgan Frost,
right,
for the next game. But again, it doesn't guarantee anything else day by day. Today, when they set up their practice, it was with those two guys eventually going to be placed into the lineup. So they're trying to have some level of cohesion.
But they could be stuck on the West Coast getting games canceled, is my point, because you just don't know.
But Kevin,
a couple other points though that should be raised here that I think is sometimes forgotten. Younger players tend to live together. So, like Lucas Raymond was diagnosed right before Christmas. He lives with Moritz Seider. What do you think the odds are that Moritz Seider is going to get this week? I mean, I think they're pretty good. Also, players on the team hang out together when they're not at the rink. They go out and have lunch together and everything else. So we're going to see that. And here's the thing that nobody's discussing. Danny DeKeyser has had COVID twice this season. He's had it twice. My daughter has had it twice.
Yeah.
So we could go through this and guys could get it again. It only takes a couple of months from what I've read for the antibodies to leave your system.
Well, it could be because of different variants. And
that's exactly right.
Now, also the thing is, it's the limitation in terms of the taxi squad is 6 players. This is spreading exponentially, and I'll just use the Leafs as an example. December 17th, 4 players. December 18th, 4 more players. By the beginning of next week, it went from 4 to 8 to 14. You only have 6 players. You could end up playing with less than 20 skaters, even with the taxi squad. So
the NBA is doing it, right? If you look at the NBA, they don't have full
8
squads in a lot of times, right?
8.
You look at the Nets, that 9 guys out at once. The thing that amazes me, and Kevin, I want your view from reading what the CBA is. I'm still trying to understand how the NHLPA is bearing the cost of the emergency recalls and the taxi squad benefits that are going as part of the player share that they're going to have to pay back to the league as part of the escrow payment. Can someone explain to me what in God's name Don Fear and the NHLPA was thinking here and how they agreed to this? Because this just strikes me as exceedingly odd.
Well, guaranteeing your 80%. That's what it is, Jan.
That is exactly what it's all about. But I read that too, and I thought, my God, even in the midst of COVID, we've got to negotiate and make sure we're watching our P's and Q's. Although, that's a good entree into talking something that Russ brought up, and we wondered about the way this was all worded. It sounded like it was the NHL idea, but it sure sounds like, from talking to people, that essentially Gary Bettman said, you need me to be the bad guy, kind of like when you're a parent, you tell your kids, if you need an out, you can just blame it on your parents.
Right.
If you don't want it, if you want to look good with your buddies and everything, just say it was your dad or your mom. You do that all the time when you're a parent.
I don't know anything about that stuff.
No, but that's how it works. I'm sure Anthony can talk about it. Whenever you need an out, if you're not comfortable, you can just blame it on your parents.
But I mean, Epstein proved that on Welcome Back, Kotter. But anyway, but I think that's what happened here. I'm sure Gary Bettman said, I'll be happy to be the bad guy here, and because it was the right thing to do. And I think Donald Fear knew that. I think a lot of the top players knew that, and I think we saw prior to that kind of the NHL version of economic indicators. Like, all of a sudden, I thought the right people started to say things like Dylan Larkin, for example, is a very popular player. Yeah.
All of a sudden, like, he really wanted to go. All of a sudden, he was saying, well, I don't know. And I thought, they may not go.
The other thing is, I don't think the players ever fully grasp when they say they want to be equal partners, then situations come up like this, and you have to bear some expense. Like, the owners are the ones on the hook for everything. They're on the hook for so many things. When you want to be an equal partner, you do have to bear equal expense at times.
I guess I'm fortunate, Russ, that I worked 16 years in mortgage banking because I understand the concept of escrow. Some NHL players don't, still to this day, after being in a collective bargaining agreement for over 15 years that involved escrow, the concept of escrow. It's like, I don't get it. It's not rocket science. So,
No.
Now, the one thing, Kev, that I heard something about, I don't know where I heard this, but I heard there was a possibility of this, and I asked Kyle Dubas during a Zoom media availability yesterday regarding scheduling. Now the Leafs have 6 games that they have to make up, and they can make that up during the 3 weeks in February, but you've got Quebec with 0 fans. You've got Alberta, Manitoba, and Ontario with 50%. I don't know what BC is, but I heard there's a possibility of them shifting games out of Canada in January to play later on in the season when they have full access, for the simple reason that they want to get the most revenue. And if they play games now in Canada, it's going to be at half price or no price.
And I don't know why the league wouldn't want them to do that, because it's in the league's best interest to, churn up the revenue as well. So, yeah, that makes some sense to me. I have not heard that from anyone specifically, but there is some logic to that. And, neutral site games, when you're involving, prominent teams, are really not neutral site games because their teams travel well with fan bases. And I'm sure it would be, fans would make every effort to get to those games, although leaving Canada to go see them would be difficult.
Yeah.
But there's still a lot of Canadian fans that are rooted in the United States that would go to those games for sure.
I think that's what, Mike, you brought up earlier also. So the Stars kind of bringing up, if you saw Connor McDavid's interview, right, where he talked about a quote-unquote best on best tournament and there being 8 years between them. We've been talking for a while, a kind of world, a World Cup. What have you heard anything, Kevin, in terms of them leaning the league towards getting one set up sooner rather than later? Just because the last we know how successful it was, right? You're going to not have an Olympics unless it gets pushed back. To wait another 4 years for another Olympics seems to be a wide swath of time, rather than getting another one another year or two.
Yeah, and I've seen the stories too about a generation of players that won't get to play in the Olympics, and I think that's a bigger issue. As much as I enjoy the World Cups, and they're good and they're successful, but they're not the Olympics. So I think they'll make an effort to do it as some form of appeasement, but they're not the same as far as I'm concerned, just in terms of the worldwide stage. When you're playing the Olympics, like everybody in the world is watching. People that don't give one iota about hockey are watching them. That won't happen with the World Cup. It'll still be hockey fans in various countries. So I hope they do it, and my guess is they will do it, but it's not the same.
Would it be a little different, Kevin? I mean, if you have now certain broadcast partners, maybe becomes a bit more. Maybe again, you're right. It probably still will be mostly hockey fans, but do you think potentially if you have an ESPN, if you have a TNT, that you might get a little more amplification than you might have had in the past that you've had?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I do think it'll be better, but it still won't be the same just because the stage is just so much smaller. It's really hard to explain like how big the Olympics are, but when you're covering them, your audience, you realize right away, like instead of having 50,000 people reading your stories, you got 600,000.
Well,
I would say this though: if they do bring it back, bring back a Team North America. I know the league didn't like it because the younger players were schooling some of the vets, but tough. The fans liked it.
I don't think the idea of country versus country, younger players playing against their own country, was necessarily something that really felt great.
Yeah, but the fans liked it. That's all that matters.
Yeah, but I mean, first of all, the range of reaction from the player. I mean, I heard Austin Matthews' comments yesterday. I mean, Tavares was disappointed that this might be his last chance to go to the Olympics, so that was the thing that really sucked. But Matthews was like, I wanted to play with guys like Patrick Kane, who I idolized, and he's not going to get that opportunity now, but it may happen in a World Cup. But the reaction of McDavid and Matthews, it was like, it's so disappointing, it's so frustrating. Brad Marchand's comments, which is typical Brad Marchand. I know at the end of the day, the NHL doesn't care about the Olympics. They don't make money from it. And ultimately and that's ultimately what this is. It's a business and we're an asset. So he knows that deep down in their hearts, the owners and the NHL never wanted to go to Beijing. And probably from his point of view, they were looking for their first opportunity to bail. And
I could say that because he's been making $7 million a year too. Guys that really do need to make money may feel differently. I know they all want to go to the Olympics, but if they were looking at it as, hey, I got to get paid, there are some guys that still need to get paid. Brad Marchand doesn't, so it's easy for him.
And if things are normal in 4 years, you can bet your bottom dollar they will be in Italy, given location. I can, for a fact they will be there. Look,
I'd love to.
They also, a lot of people, ignore the human rights element associated with, which is why some people didn't want to go. Also, that conveniently got forgotten in that comment.
That's why it's a tough look when players saying they're so disappointed. It's like, people would actually like to see them just be a little disappointed in what's going on over there, too.
I made the comment to Russ last night. You have 600, meaning all NHL players, 600 plus LeBron Jameses ignoring what's going on politically in China, and because they want to go to the Olympics because it's the Olympics, like Kevin was saying. I get that, but don't ignore what is going on politically in the world, not only COVID, but what's going on with the Uyghurs in Western China. And you can't ignore that stuff. That's why the U.S. didn't go to Moscow in 1980, because the invasion of Afghanistan. They would have gone if there wasn't an invasion of Afghanistan, but I don't know. Anything else that springs to mind that you want to talk about, guys, before we end the show? Okay.
It's hard, it's kind of hard to even think about the competition because, we don't know what it's going to look like when we get going again.
Well, there's a press conference today, Kev, for USA Hockey. What do you think that's going to go like for that Olympic press conference?
Yeah, well, I'm curious to know, because they're redoing everything. I did hear yesterday again that they will indeed have college players and they have some commitments. So, we'll see. That's what I was told. I wasn't told at this time by someone within USA Hockey. I was told that by someone in the college community who had heard they were going to go. But, I think you're going to see a collection of European, American players. Like most people don't even realize that we have a couple hundred players playing over in Europe. So the pool is pretty big. So
well, I heard. Okay, we heard about Bobby Ryan going to Switzerland to play,
Right.
which I'm assuming is just to get back in shape and to play for the U.S. in Beijing. I think Jeff Merrick on his radio show suggested Patrick Marleau, because Patrick Marleau is basically not retired, but he was open to being out there, and he's a free agent and can go over like Gianta did 4 years ago.
Right.
But what I question is, and I think this was in an article in The Athletic about Owen Power and Beniers and some of these players in the World Juniors, whether they will go and whether their college team, like the University of Michigan, are they going to let everybody go over to Beijing? I don't know. I don't know if they will.
Yeah, I would doubt they're going to let everybody go. They'll probably figure out who can go and who can't based on how they're doing in school, where their classes are, how their team's going to be. Because if you take 5 guys out for that long, it's going to
and the possible quarantine factor also.
That is big, man. I agree with you on that. Already we've seen stories that it was out of Sweden where I read the story in the translation where the players over there saying, "Well, what are we, chopped liver?"
Yeah.
If they're not going to go and they're concerned over the 3, then you're going to just we'll just send these guys because we don't care about them.
Good for Sweden knowing what chopped liver is. I give them credit.
Okay. On that note, we'll end the show right there. For Anthony Mangione, for Jan Levine, for Kevin Allen, and for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching. And remember, without the buzz and whatever that was, it's just